Breaking news! This just in for you, the viewer.
In an interview with The Atlantic, Graham commented, "I would say there's a 3 in 10 chance we use the military option." And he says the number goes higher to 70% if North Koreans conduct another nuclear bomb test. In a speech during a trip to Asia, President Trump warned the nation against continued weapons testing.
When I say to the North, do not underestimate us and do not try us.
I don't want to get under closer doors. I don't want to play around with the first stage mission.
At the same time, he offered a path to peace.
We will offer a path to a much better future. It begins with an end to the aggression of your regime, a stop to your development of ballistic missiles, and complete, verifiable, and total denuclearization.
At the Security Council, giving no indication at all that they'll be willing to talk to the U.S. or to anyone for that matter to try to resolve this peacefully. Instead, what they did is continue to use provocative language to blame the U.S., saying that they have a nuclear program in North Korea as self-defense.
Our possession of nuclear weapons was an individual self-defensive measures of defend our sovereignty and the rights of existence and development from the U.S. nuclear threat and blackmail, and anyone is to blame for it. The U.S. is the one who must be held accountable. There are several nuclear power states over the world now, but there is no country like the U.S. who is continuing to openly threat and blackmail other countries with its nuclear weapons. We could easily draw to the answer of this case, only being noted now much amount of money of the years is running through for the maintenance and modernization of its nuclear weapons. It is already well known to the outside that the U.S. has now stockpiled more than 4,000 nuclear warheads in its nuclear arsenals, deploying over 115 technical nuclear bombs over the territory of its NATO allies, and is now planning to consume of around $1 trillion for its nuclear weapons maintenance and modernization during 30 years in future. All of the figures above clearly prove that the U.S. is only the ringleader in nuclear proliferation. It is also disturbing to see the UN Security Council acting like a tool of the U.S. and playing to each turn instead of keeping impartiality as the lifeline in its activities through to its mission to pressure international peace and security.
Well, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson responded to this statement, this provocation, reiterating that their nuclear program violates international law. Tillerson said all the options are on the table, including military action, but the priority is to pressure and to continue to sanction North Korea to force them to the diplomatic table.
The international community condemns North Korea's pursuit of a nuclear arsenal, and we will never accept a nuclear North Korea. The DPRK's unlawful acts cannot be ignored, nor can they be explained away. They alone are responsible for these tensions. They alone must take responsibility for these tensions, and they alone can solve these tensions.
Tillerson made it clear, though, that the communication lines are open if North Korea is willing to walk through that door. The UN, by the way, UN Secretary General, very, very concerned that any kind of miscalculation or miscommunication can lead to an accidental conflict and escalate to a full-scale war.
An American Enterprise Institute scholar and Fox News contributor, he recently wrote that President Trump should declare North Korea a ballistic no-fly zone, meaning that any attempt by the rogue regime will be met by a military strike. So will that happen? You believe that the president should respond to this militarily?
Sure. Well, I mean, here as Trace just reported, the North Koreans now have a missile that could reach Washington, D.C. potentially. So this is getting real right now. If they are able to put a miniaturized nuclear warhead on that, then they have the capability of holding Americans, every American citizen, their own nuclear hostage. So we have to decide as a country, are we okay with Kim Jong-un being able to hold all of our children hostages to nuclear blackmail? And if we're not okay with that, then we have to figure out something to do about it. My proposal is simply that the President of the United States should stop the North's nuclear and ballistic missile testing by declaring that henceforth, the United States is going to enforce a ballistic missile no-fly zone over North Korea and a nuclear no-test zone. And that any time the North Koreans attempt to launch a ballistic missile, we're going to take it out. We might take it out with our missile defenses. We might take it out on the ground. If they try to take a nuclear test, we're going to take it out. And he should give them assurances that it'll be a limited strike, just like his strike in Syria was when the North Syrians violated the Obama red line and right. used chemical weapons. He just took out the base, but he didn't overthrow them. And give them that assurance that if they don't retaliate, that'll be it. But we can stop their testing, and I doubt that they would respond.
Harry, you think that's a big mistake?
Martha, I think that's a huge mistake, and let me tell you why. I think it's an innovative approach. I give Mark a lot of credit, and I read a lot of his stuff, and I agree with a lot of him, many things, but not this. Reason being is, let me pose a scenario. Let's say the North Koreans decide, for whatever reason, to test a nuclear weapon. And, they test the weapon, it goes off, and then we fire a Tomahawk missile into that testing range. Well, you know what can happen? That testing range could implode, and we could end up having radioactive fallout going through Seoul or Tokyo. We're talking about 25 million people in Seoul, another 35 million in Tokyo. So you know what I'd advocate? Let's keep the Trump approach going on North Korea. Let's continue containment, let's ratchet the sanctions up, and let's push North Korea to economic collapse. But let's not start opening up what could be the ultimate beehive. I just don't think that's the right way to go in this scenario.
Well, it's pretty clear, and General Mattis touched on this in terms of the research and development that we're witnessing from North Korea, Tony, that they want to be able to have a thermonuclear warhead that could reach the United States. And once they have that, really nobody's going to be able to bother them in any way. So that's clearly their goal, right?
Right. Well, good. Yeah, no, I agree. Now, I don't agree with both of you completely, but let me tell you kind of why I don't. First, the ballistic missile technology that they need is already there. I don't buy what Trey said about them not having reentry. Look, it's a ceramic, for God's sake. Ceramics aren't that difficult, so I think we have to assume that they can mount something to a rocket. With that said, I disagree that hitting one of these in orbit is going to cause all sorts of radioactive fallout. It's going to be minimal, especially when you can consider reentry. But we're not there yet technically. So what Mark's saying may have merit, but we can't do it. We've got to make sure that if we decide to go down that path, we have to do something called Brilliant Pebbles, which I've talked to a number of members of Congress about, both Democrat and Republican. And by the way, Hawaii is not simply doing response drills. They're actually putting more things in place. I don't want to get into great detail, but there are things being done to protect Hawaii and our coast. But we've got to be very clear on this. If we decide to take a policy like Mark is saying, we have to be able to back it up. There has to be a clear and concise penalty that we can enforce. So I don't believe it will be as catastrophic catastrophic. But then again, I don't think we can do it at this point. So we're left with working with the Trump policy.
So what's clear here is that diplomacy is not going to work. So we need some sort of coercion to get them to do it. I agree with Colonel Schaefer that our ballistic missile technology isn't where it ought to be, because for the last 3 decades the Democrats have been busy gutting ballistic missile defense. Any Democrat who's upset about
Harry,
North Korea
quickly, and then Tony.
should be looking at themselves.
Okay, Harry.
You know, Martha, I think
I'm just saying that you don't have to hit it in the air. You can take out a site on the ground.
Well, you know what? I want to take the long view here. No matter what policy you want, whether you want a military option, whether you want containment, know this: the North Koreans are going to continue to test missiles, and come February, when we have the Olympics in South Korea, 60 miles from the North Korean border, we need to really have our game prepared, because this is only going to get worse.
All right, quick thought from Tony to close.
Well, look, nothing happened while the president was in the Pacific. I think that tells me that they're taking his presence and our position very seriously. This didn't happen while he was there. The North Koreans did this when the Chinese left to poke them in the eye. That's the key. We need to leverage China in such a way to make them accountable, because we're here not only because of the bad policy of the past 2 White Houses not developing nuclear counter technology, but because the North Koreans have been allowed to do this by the Chinese. I would argue, Martha, we got to go after the Chinese and threaten their most favored nation trade status as something that they must be afraid that will enforce. And
all good ideas
they didn't do it.
To be on the table. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Good to see all of you tonight.